Yurina, 601, you want me to jump in?
Let's get started.
My little spiel. So,
Yeah.
introduce myself to everybody. Sammy Arnold, and I'm the executive director of the Japan American Society. And we, of course, we are the co-hosts, I would say, of the Reading Between the Lines series with Yurina, who's the real star. And but we, a number of other things that I just wanted to mention. We have our signature event coming up on April 11th. It's the Nashville Cherry Blossom Festival. So anybody who is in the Middle Tennessee area, Brandon, Monica for sure. I'm not sure where everybody else is, but if you're around Nashville, April 11th, free event in downtown Nashville, and it's tremendous. It's grown. It's one of the biggest Japanese cultural festivals in the Southeast at this point. I think we can safely say. And so, but we've got that coming up, and a number of other things on our website, of course, jastn.org. And we record these so that people who weren't able to join live can log back in and watch after the fact, in which a lot of people do. And so just wanted to let everybody know that. And I'll read Yurina's bio here before I kick it over to her. So Yurina Yoshikawa is a writer and educator based in Nashville. She holds Master of Fine Arts degree from Columbia University, and her writing has appeared in The Atlantic, NPR, Lit Hub, The Japan Times, and elsewhere. And Yurina was the inaugural winner of the 2024 Southern Prize in Literary Arts. She plays the viola with the Nashville Philharmonic Orchestra and has hosted Reading Between the Lines with the Japan American Society of Tennessee since 2022. And so with that, I'm going to kick it over to the star, Yurina.
Thank you, Sammy. And thank you, everyone else at JAST as well. I see a lot of the staff here, Raina, William, and Ginger. You all do so much to make these wonderful events happen throughout the year. And doing these reading between the lines sessions is such a highlight for me. I feel selfish every time, like I just get to choose the books I want to talk about and talk about it with people who are, and I see a lot of familiar faces here at this point. This is our ninth installment. And we've covered a lot of topics and a lot of different, generations. And it's just been really fun to look back. And just preparing for this was such a treat for me. So thank you all for having me tonight. For those who are new, these sessions are meant to be interactive. I'll do a presentation. I'll give some context about the author and the book, and then we'll look at excerpts from the text together. So even if you don't have the book in front of you, we can still talk about it, and whatever comes up, comes up. But feel free to use the chat function in Zoom if you have a thought or question, or you can just simply unmute yourself and start talking. And I'd love for this to feel like a conversation. So please don't hesitate. We'll also have time at the end for Q&A. And if you know me, I always over prepare. So I will do my best to get through what I have planned. We will go over excerpts from three short stories, the first three in the collection. And if we don't get to all three, that's okay. But, that is the plan. So here we go. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen and. Da, 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 da. All right. I hope everyone's able to see this okay. Okay, I see some nodding heads. Reading between the lines, Rashomon and 17 other stories by Ryunosuke Akutagawa. I'm curious. So I put this cover. This is the latest edition that Penguin Classics has put out. I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I just want to see in the room. I have this older version that came out in 2006, the really classic. Yeah, Andrea, I see we have the same one. Does anybody else have a different version of this book by any chance? If not, that's okay. I'm just very curious to see. Because, okay, I will go back to my presentation, but the latest cover, oh my goodness, it is so beautiful. They made it look like the red lacquered wood that you might see on like a gate or an old traditional house, and you'll see the gold letterings and the patterns that you might see on a traditional kimono. And it's hardcover. The content is the same, but this truly feels like a beautiful thing to hold. And if you're in Nashville, Parnassus has a few copies, so go on over there if you're interested. All right. See, I'm doing it again. I'm talking too much. All right. Who was Ryunosuke Akutagawa? So the reason that we chose this author and this series of stories for this round is because his name has come up many, many times, including our sessions of reading between the lines. And we'll get to that in a minute. But he's really considered one of the greats of Japanese literature. And he is someone that if you just ask an average Japanese person to list who are some of the best writers of your country, his name is bound to come up. And I have a feeling that, it's important to read contemporary novels too, but looking at the classics like him, I think will provide really good context for when you are going back and reading, current Japanese literature. So he was born in 1892 in Tokyo during the Meiji period. And the only thing I'll say about the Meiji period is that it was a time of great transformation for the country. It was the time when they were modernizing at a rapid pace. So you can imagine walking down the streets of Tokyo and seeing, some of the older generations still wearing kimono. And in here, in this photo, Ryunosuke Akutagawa is wearing a kimono as well. But this was also a time when people started wearing Western clothes for the first time, and people were wearing suits and dresses and trying to look like Westerners. And there was a mishmash of that happening everywhere. And so it's a very interesting time to be an artist. He published Rashomon, the story that we're about to look at, while he was still a student at Tokyo Imperial University, which is now known as just Tokyo University. They took the imperial part out after the war. But this university is basically the Harvard of Japan. If you get into this place, then you're bound to be successful in whatever field. And he studied English literature while he was there. And he was incredibly inspired by Edgar Allan Poe, who you might know from, like the Raven and other short stories that also deal with kind of like mystery and horror and the macabre. He also really loved Dostoevsky, who's a Russian novelist, dealing with really big questions. And, there's a lot of just human emotions, just, the mostly dark, mostly not the happy ones. But he was really fascinated by other writers just exploring that. Oh, one interesting note about his name. Ryunosuke literally means the son of the dragon. And Ryu means dragon. But he was named this because he was born astrologically at the hour, day, and month of the dragon. So he's all dragon. If you're into astrology and things like that, that might be a fun little factoid for you. And oh, I will also say if you do get this version from Penguin Classics, the introduction by Haruki Murakami is fantastic and will go into more details of the author's life. And, I don't want to spend too much time on that so that we can get more, to the actual stories, but I highly recommend it. That's where I pulled some of these bullet points from. But let's see. If you are interested in reading more Japanese literature around this time, Natsume Soseki, he's another big name. He's also considered one of the other greats, but he was a mentor to Akutagawa. And he also wrote these novels that, every Japanese school girl and boy have to read at a certain point in their lives. And so just putting that into context there. This author was fascinated by Christianity and the Bible. And like I said, the Meiji period is a time when Japan is modernizing a lot. People are reading literature from all over, but Christianity is still a little bit taboo at this time. And the Tokyo government would, not look very happily on a person reading things like the Bible. So he would be reading texts like these in secret in his home. And that's kind of interesting, and maybe when you look at some of the stories later, you'll find some influences and threads of stories that also deal with really big questions. And he talks a lot about heaven and hell and morality. So, this is a guy who was really fascinated by that in um, yeah, with the Bible and all that too. In 1927, he passed away by suicide at age 35, which is incredibly young. But even during, those years when he was actively writing, he wrote over 100 short stories. So the short stories that are compiled in this book, they're just a sliver of the things that he wrote. And you know, uh, I think if you're gonna dive in even more, you'll have to probably find them in the original Japanese. There's another book called Kappa, which is based on a myth of a sea creature that's published in a separate book. That's only if you're very interested in continuing on your Akutagawa journey. Um, a few years after his death, his friend Kikuchi Kan, who was also a publisher, he established the Akutagawa Prize in his friend's honor. And this is the prize that many, many contemporary writers today, if you have seen their works translated into English, look at their bio, and it's bound to say they won the Akutagawa Award because that's really what propels them to fame and to the point where their work can be translated into English. So that's the background on the author and the prize. Does anybody have any questions? Or I know I kind of glossed over a lot of his life that you might get to read in the introduction in the book, but does anybody have any questions before we move on? All right. I wanted to show you the different covers of this, not necessarily this exact compilation, but in Japan, you might see Rashomon by Akutagawa Ryunosuke just on a simple, no pictures version. But there's these other two that I just found really funny. So this top one, the orange cover, I think it's like an anime-fied Akutagawa, looking very handsome and mysterious. And, the scarf is flowing behind him. And then in this version below, the dark one, I have a feeling this is trying to be based on the Rashomon story because of the big gate behind him. But the only gripe I have about this one is that the gate here looks a little bit too polished and new. As we'll see in the story, it's supposed to be in ruins. So I don't really know what that's about, but still might be appealing to these younger readers who, might gravitate more towards the manga, anime type stuff and, trying to lure them into reading classical Japanese literature. This is the cover that I have, like I said. It's taken from a kabuki play. And what I think is interesting about this is, Akutagawa wrote a lot of stories that took place in, the 12th century or, that kind of like ancient times. But he was writing in the 20th century. So when you just look at this cover without knowing much about him, you might think that this is a guy from like hundreds of years ago, when in fact he's still, within the last 100 years. And then this one, the other edition by Penguin Classics, I was curious if anybody else had this version because it looks almost like a graphic novel, but it's just the cover. It's showing like three panels that are from the story Rashomon that we'll take a look at. But it's that's another interesting way of trying to get new readers, to this work. So, Rashomon, if I just mention the name without the author, people are most likely going to associate it with the adapted film by Akira Kurosawa. I'm just curious, just like hands up if you've seen this film, Rashomon by Kurosawa. Okay, I see one, two. All right. Well, I highly recommend it. It is a truly wonderful adaptation. Sometimes, when you read the text and you watch the film, people might always say like the text is better. But in this case, I think Kurosawa did a lot of justice. And what's interesting is that he combined two different stories that Akutagawa wrote to make this movie. But it's still very true to the feel, not just the content, but just the sensory feel of the writing really comes through in this film. And these are three different posters. So the far one here is the Japanese version, looks very dramatic, looks almost kabuki-like. The one in the middle is a German poster. And what I love about this is that it's fragmented and it's kind of hinting at the way the story is going to be structured. And then the one on the other side is the Hollywood version, with the actors just looking. It just looks like a Hollywood film. And this film did incredibly well globally. So I think that's another way that because of the success of this adaptation, people ended up wanting to read the original text. And so that's how his stories live on too. All right. So, like I was saying, Rashomon, this is it literally means like the Great Gate. And this is what a little still from the film, but that you can see. And it takes place in Kyoto, which was the old capital of Japan. And it is literally crumbling. It is, just in a really desperate state. You would think that, a place that inspired a whole story and movie would still be kind of, a place that you could visit. But actually, this is a photo of what it looks like today. It's just a playground. It's a playground in Tokyo, and they have a little stone engraving here that says, Rashomon once stood here. And it was a gate that led, I believe, to one of the great palaces, but none of that exists. And here's this stone. And for the Japanese language nerds, I wanted to point out that the second kanji that you see in the stone here, you'll notice this is the kanji for castle. Ra, and so it was actually more like Rajomon instead of Rashomon. And when Akutagawa adapted, this gate for his story, he used a different kanji, which is the kanji for life, Rashomon. It sounds the same, but he used a different kanji to kind of imply that this gate was like the gate of life and added that second meaning with the kanji character. So the actual gate really just meant like a gate to the castle. Just a little nerdy fact. All right, so I'm going to stop my presentation for a second, make sure that, does anybody have any questions so far before we dive into the text? All right. If you have your copy of the book, we're just going to take a look at the first few sections of Rashomon, the very first story in the collection. And oh, actually, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop sharing again because I want to see your faces. May I have maybe two volunteers who can unmute themselves and read out loud so that you're not just hearing my voice this entire time? And if you're able to, just raise your hand and I'll note your names. William, thank you. Can I get another volunteer? And you don't have to have the copy in front of you. You'll see it just on the screen. I just want someone to read it out loud. Going once, going twice. Andrea, is that a yes?
Oh, okay. I think I can do it if I know how to unmute myself.
You're doing
I'll do it.
great. I will call on you when the
Okay, you
time
can hear
comes.
me? Oh,
Thank you.
okay. I didn't know
Thank you
whether you
so
could.
much.
Okay.
All right.
Uh,
I'm going to share my screen again, and we'll start with Rashomon. We won't read the whole thing, just a few parts. So, Andrea, why don't we, because you're already unmuted, let's start with you. Can you read just,
okay.
I'll know when to stop.
Okay. Um, Evening, and a lowly servant sat beneath the Rashomon, waiting for the rain to end. Under the broad gate there was no one else, just a single cricket clinging to a huge red pillar from which the lacquer was peeling here and there. Situated on a thoroughfare as important as Sukiyaku Avenue, the Rashomon could have been sheltering at least a few others from the rain, perhaps a woman in a lacquered reed hat, or a courier with a soft black cap. Yet there was no one besides the man. This was because Kyoto had been struck by one calamity after another in recent years, earthquakes, whirlwinds, fires, famine, leading to the capital's extraordinary decline. Old records tell us that people would smash Buddhist statues and other devotional gear, pile the pieces by the roadside with flecks of paint and gold and silver foil still clinging to them, and sell them as firewood. With the whole city in such turmoil, no one bothered to maintain the Rashomon. Foxes and badgers came to live in the dilapidated structure, and they were soon joined by thieves. Finally, it became the custom to abandon unclaimed corpses in the upper story of the gate, neighborhood, which made the neighborhood an eerie place everyone avoided after the sun went down.
Okay, we'll pause there. Thank you.
Okay.
The first, three paragraphs, let's talk about it. This is setting the scene. I want you all to notice the rain, the way he sets this up with, the very first sentence is it's evening, and there's a lowly servant sitting beneath this big gate. He's waiting for the rain to end. And I want you to just put this at the back of your head for when you see the Kurosawa Rashomon, because the way he uses rain is incredible. And it's definitely, being very mindful of this first line. I'm curious, what are some other things that you all are noticing in this opening of the short story? What are the things that are coming up for you? No wrong answers.
I think it's just shocking that there's corpses. I mean, that sets the tone in another dimension for me.
Oh, yes.
Corpses. I mean, that seems unbelievable.
Yeah. Very, very horror like.
Right, right.
Yeah. Anyone else have any reactions or just
The crows flocking there is points out to
hmm.
me
Right,
that
yeah.
after everything is left, it's just crows now.
Yeah. That's very Edgar Allan Poe too, right? Like if you've
Right.
read the or heard of The Raven, that's all about crows. It feels like this is a story that takes place in it's based on a 12th century Japanese tale and retold, in he published this as a student in 1915. So this is still the beginning of the 20th century. And we can talk more about what the Rashomon represents, but this is a world that like we were talking about with the Meiji period, this is when old Japan is crumbling. So we're gonna skip ahead and if you're following with me with the book, we're gonna go to page 5. And William, can we have you unmute yourself? And I would like you to read from the man. Oh, and let's just say this. I'm going to summarize a little bit. So there's this lowly servant. He's just been fired. And he's, has nowhere to go. He has no money. He has no food. And so he's taking shelter here, not just from the rain, but really just for life. And he decides, because he's so desperate, all I can do is become a thief. That's just like something that is now, a part of who he is now because of the circumstances. William, can you read from The Man Gave a Great Sneeze?
Yes, forgive any mispronunciations. It's been a while since I've read aloud. So,
That's all right.
the man gave a great sneeze and dragged himself to his feet. The Kyoto evening chill was harsh enough to make him yearn for a brazier full of warm coals. Darkness fell, and the wind blew unmercifully through the pillars of the gate. Now even the cricket was gone from its perch on the red lacquered pillar. Beneath his blue robe and yellow undershirt, the man hunched his shoulders and drew his head down as he scanned the area around the gate. If only there were some place out of the wind and rain, with no fear of prying eyes, where I could have an untroubled sleep. I would stay there until dawn, he thought. Just then he caught sight of a broad stairway, also lacquered red, leading to the upper story of the gate. Anybody up there is dead. taking care lest his sword, with its bare wooden handle, slip from its scabbard. The man set one straw sandal foot on the bottom step. A few minutes later, halfway up the broad stairway, he crouched cat-like, holding his breath as he took stock of the gate's upper chamber. Firelight from above cast a dim glow on the man's right cheek, a cheek inflamed with a pus-filled pimple amid the hairs of a short beard. The servant had not considered the possibility that anyone but dead people could be up here. But climbing two or three more steps, he realized that someone was not only burning a light, but moving it from place to place. He saw the dull yellow glow flickering against the underside of the roof, where spiderwebs hung in the corners. No ordinary person could be burning a light up here in the Rashomon on a rainy night like this.
Let's pause there. Okay, so we're getting a little bit more into this character, this servant. Um, I want you to take notice too of, if another writer were to take just what happens in this story, they could probably write it up in a paragraph. But Akutagawa decides to really stretch it out and really pause and notice all the colors, all of the, you know, even in this paragraph, like there's so much detail about the blue robe and the yellow undershirt. And there's, he's crouching cat-like, holding his breath. It's almost like, and this is still 1915, decades before Kurosawa, but it really feels cinematic. Like he's giving the readers direction on where to focus, and there's a lot of zooming in. I want you also to, maybe this stood out for you too, the pus-filled pimple on his cheek. That's something that, I think in a lot of Akutagawa stories, you'll see these really kind of grotesque close-ups of just human faces and bodies. And I think he was really fascinated by that. Um, did anyone else have any thoughts or questions that popped out from this section?
Okay, for me, with no fear of prying eyes, you're like, do you not have bigger things to be worried about right now? But the thing is like, it seems, I guess, like he's just recently come into this sad state of affairs. Like he's just recently lost his job as a
Hmm.
servant. And so he maybe hasn't descended into that state of real desperation yet, like the lady that he meets in a little while.
Hmm.
So at this point, he still has maybe the luxury of worrying about what, I mean, you want to be like, dude, just, I think I'd be more concerned about finding a meal or a number of other things, but he's still worried about how people are going to see him. Right.
Right.
And it's so, there's some of that in all three of these, but especially, this one, I didn't catch that line the first time, but then after you've read the last story, the nose, of course, that's of course
That's all about
all
that.
through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that stood out to me just now.
Yeah. Thank you.
I wondered if he's a servant, why does he have a sword? Is that normal?
Oh, that is a good question. I actually I don't have like the historical context for this, but I imagine, I wonder if there's any hints here. He had been working, I think, for, um, it doesn't really go into detail of like what house he worked for, but it seems like, this is Kyoto, which is the old capital. And if you're working in any of these big old-fashioned houses, even as a servant, you might have had the duty to be, like almost like a bodyguard. And
Mm-hmm.
this is still the era when you would see samurai out and about, and they would definitely have swords. But yeah, I'm curious about that too. Does anybody here happen to have an answer? Does anybody here happen to know 12th century Japanese? I got to brush up on that, but I'll make a note of it, Monica, and let you know after.
I,
Um,
this
yeah.
could be wrong, so it could be me lying. I know that there was a point where different classes had swords, but then it just depends on which person came into ruling during if there was a shogunate or not. If I
Right.
remember right, it was when Tokugawa may have gotten rid of other classes other than samurai having swords to keep the elitism of the samurai in there. So I think that
That
they had
sounds
swords
right.
beforehand, And then when he came into power, he got rid of it in other classes.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think, when we read the next story in A Bamboo Grove, there's a lot of attention to detail on the sword and the dagger, and there's a lot of attention, to these weapons. And I wonder too, like, because Akutagawa was writing these, in the 20th century when it wasn't common that much anymore for people to have swords, but I think maybe it was like he was writing these not to be historically accurate necessarily, but just almost as like nostalgia for old Japan. And I wonder if there's an element of like a little bit of um like a dream version of old Japan at play here. Yeah. We're going to move on to the next page where we meet the old woman. Andrea, would you mind reading a little
Oh,
bit
yeah, I love
from
her.
this is page 6.
Okay.
Um, it starts with, "For now, the servant's eyes." It's like
Okay.
the third, yeah.
Okay. For now, the servant's eyes caught sight of a living person crouched among the corpses. There, dressed in a rusty black robe, was a scrawny old woman, white-haired and monkey-like. She held a burning pine stick in her right hand as she stared into the face of a corpse. Judging from the long hair, the body was probably a woman's, moved by 6 parts terror and 4 parts curiosity. The servant forgot to breathe for a moment. To borrow a phrase from a writer of old, he felt as if the hairs on his heads were growing thick. Then the crone thrust her pine torch between 2 floorboards and placed both hands on the head of the corpse she had been examining. Like a monkey searching for fleas on its child, she began plucking out the corpse's long hairs, one strand at a time. A hair seemed to slip easily from the scalp with every moment of her hand. Each time a hair gave way, a little of the man's fear disappeared, to be replaced by an increasingly violent loathing for the old woman. No, this could be misleading. He felt not so much a loathing for the old woman as a revulsion for all things evil, an emotion that grew in strength with every passing minute. And if now someone were to present this lowly fellow again with the choice he had been mulling beneath the gate, whether to starve to death or turn to thievery, he would probably have chosen starvation without the least regret. So powerfully had the man's hatred for the evil blazed up like the pine torch the old woman had stood between the floorboards.
We'll pause there. Thank you so much for that. Wow. Yeah. Very scary, very eerie. I mean, I saw just like in my little thumbnail, of all of your faces, a lot of scrunched up eyebrows, like what is going on? And that is the intended effect. This is a very horrifying short story that, you know, um, it's really just two of these characters, the servant and this mysterious old woman who is plucking the hairs of corpses. For the sake of time, I'm just going to summarize a little bit of what she's doing here. She is trying to make a wig for herself. And she, like in his description, um, he couldn't even tell if it was a woman at first, like he says the body was probably a woman's. That's how just like desperate she looks as well. And she must also be in a state where she's starving and she doesn't have anything to keep her hygiene or, her looks. But even still, she cares enough about her hair and the appearance of hair. So I didn't even think of this, but Sammy, you make an interesting point earlier about, the way these characters they still really kind of obsess about how other people see them,
Right.
even in these desperate times when they should just be, looking for food, but they
Right.
still care so much. And the fact that he's seeing this and somebody else, he gets all like riled up, and he has an evil sort of he sees her as evil, and he has this loathing. This whole paragraph is just all about, his feelings. Um, and it's horrifying, but it's also just, for a short story, it's I find that it's kind of like reading these stories by him, it is a very emotional experience because he spends so much time diving into what that emotion is and really stretching it out.
Mm.
Any other like thoughts or things that popped out for you all in this section?
Well, it was horrifying, but then it's reassuring what she's doing it for, right?
Right.
Because I was going, wow, I mean, oh, it's so grotesque. And then when you hear there's a reason behind it, you go, oh, okay, that's good. And it spins you around, right? It's impressive how he did that.
Yes. And, spoiler alert, but I mean, this is a short story. So, even if you were to read this knowing what happens, I think you can still enjoy it just as much. But yeah, she's kind of ordinary in her answer. She says, I was pulling out hair to make a wig. And then the servant is disappointed at how ordinary the woman's answer turned out to be. But yeah, like the horror kind of comes and goes in this, which is another interesting arc. But I'm going to skip down again to the very end here, just to and I'll read a little bit. This is at the very end of the story. So the servant, he gets all emotional with hatred, and he decides that he will be a thief after all, and he decides to steal this old woman's clothes. And he strips the old woman of her robe, and when she tried to clutch at his ankles, he gave her a kick that sent her sprawling onto the corpses. 5 swift steps brought him to the opening at the top of the stairs. Tucking her robe under his arm, he plunged down the steep stairway into the depth of the night. It did not take long for the crone who had been lying there as if dead to raise her naked body from among the corpses. Muttering and groaning, she crawled to the top of the stairway in the still burning torchlight. Her short white hair hung forward from her head as she peered down toward the bottom of the gate. She saw only the cavernous blackness of the night. What happened to the lowly servant, no one knows. That's how it ends. And this ending has a very campfire, let's tell ghost stories feel to it. There's no big moral. It's just this whole thing is like, let's see if I can spook you, and let's see if I can get you into this nightmarish space, but also start asking some of these other questions about our vanity, or like these other things kind of creep through, but the atmosphere and the attention to detail, like the rain and the colors and the way these people are moving, those are the things that really set Akutagawa up for fame in Japan as a writer. And this is something that, for a Japanese writer, you can tell that he was influenced by, like, the Western writers like Poe and Dostoevsky, just in the way he's describing these. And this was really modern and new for Japanese readers at the time. Before we move on to the Bamboo Grove, does anybody have any burning thoughts about this story?
On that last part that you mentioned,
Hmm.
that tone and the scene does remind me of Murakami. And I think in the introduction he mentioned, being influenced by this writer, and or
Hmm.
at least admitting that it had, influenced him in his own storytelling. But that I used the word liminal earlier. That
Hmm.
liminal space, that weird feeling of going to a place that you wouldn't normally go to at nighttime. Like if in school you had to go to your classroom at nighttime, that eerie kind of weird feeling of a place. I think this writer does a great job of like um, painting those scenes,
Oh,
like
yes.
Murakami.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely draw a lot of threads here. And I feel like, And the other reason you might be feeling that too is the translator is the same. It's Jay Rubin translating, and he's translated many of Murakami's books, and then he's the one translating, the Akutagawa for English readers. Um, but yeah, this kind of the tone, definitely the almost like what just happened? No one knows. Whatever became of them, no one knows. All right, let's move on to the In the Bamboo Grove. I'm going to go back to the presentation to show you. Um, there we go. In the Bamboo Grove. So this is the story that really, really inspired Kurosawa to make Rashomon. So the Rashomon movie, it takes the atmosphere and the gate and some of the feelings of the story in Rashomon, but the plot is completely this one in a bamboo grove. And what's interesting is that after this Kurosawa film, became successful, it filmmakers started to call this to call it like the Rashomon effect, where we'll see in the text too, but this is a story where you get multiple perspectives of a murder that has occurred. This is like a murder mystery, except there's just like the other story that we looked at, there's no satisfying ending. You don't quite get a clear answer, and that's the whole point. So we get perspectives from, all of these characters, the woodcutter, the priest, the policeman, but really it's a story that centers around three people. There's the bandit named Tajo Maru, and that's who you see in this still right here, who's half naked. Masago is the woman. She's the one that's behind him there. And then Takehiro, he's the one who gets murdered. He's the dead man, and he's a samurai. And you get a perspective of him as told through a medium, which is so bizarre and also so just, crazy, like imaginative. And we'll get into that. But I also wanted to just give a content warning in case you have not read the Akutagawa stories, in case you don't know anything about this or have not seen the film. This is this is a very unpleasant story. There's a lot of violence. Like I said, there's murder. So if this is not really your cup of tea, no hard feelings. Join us for our next round of reading between the lines. We'll do a more whimsical one. But just to let you know, there's gonna be some hard things that come up. But what we'll talk about in these excerpts is just the way he tells this story, which was so groundbreaking and still is. All right, In a Bamboo Grove. This is the second story in the collection, and this the other piece that inspired Kurosawa's film. And it starts, so each section you'll see there's a little title that says The Testimony of, and we start with the testimony of a woodcutter under questioning by the magistrate. William, can you read this one out, please? Just the first little bit. I'll tell you when to stop.
That is true, Your Honor. I am the one who found the body. I went out as usual this morning to cut cedar in the hills behind my place. The body was in a bamboo grove on the other side of the mountain. Its exact location, a few hundred yards off the Yamashina Post Road. The deserted place where a few scrub cedar trees are mixed with the bamboo. The man was lying on his back in his pale blue robe with the sleeves tied up and one of those fancy Kyoto-style black hats with the sharp creases. He had only one stab wound, but it was right in the middle of his chest. The bamboo leaves around the body were soaked with dark red blood. No, the bleeding had stopped. The wound looked dry, and I remember it had a big horsefly sucking on it, so hard the thing didn't even notice my footsteps. Did I see a sword or anything? No, sir, not a thing. Just a length of rope by the cedar tree next to the body. And oh, yes, there was a comb there. Uh, just the rope and the comb is all.
Okay,
But the
we'll
bleed,
pause there for a second. Thank you. So, what's so interesting about this opening is the reader is the magistrate, right? Like it's talking to you, and you're kind of filling in the blanks of this dialogue. There's this other person in this room questioning, these people, but you only get the other side of it. And this is such a fun trope. This is a fun little way to tell a story like this. But we'll move on to. I just wanted to skip forward. Trying to be mindful of the time. Oh my goodness. So we get the questioning of a traveling priest. His take is like, yeah, I saw someone, uh, and well, yeah, he's a priest, so he ends his section as, oh, what is the life of a human being? A flash of lightning, so sad. What can I say? The policeman who finds Tajo Maru, the bandit, he knows Tajo Maru from other crimes. And so he's convinced, oh yeah, he did it. Let me tell you how bad he is. And then we're going to skip forward to, oh, and then there's the old woman whose daughter is Masago, who is involved in this triangle tragedy situation. But we're going to skip forward to Tajo Maru's confession. Dun, 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 page 13. I'll read a little bit of this. And if you watch the Kurosawa film, this part is just, oh my gosh, this actor, he also appears in other Kurosawa movies like Seven Samurai and a lot of the other, samurai action flicks. But oh my gosh, this actor is so, so good. Sure, I killed the man, but I didn't kill the woman. So where did she go? I don't know any better than you do. No, wait just a minute. You can torture me all you want, but I can't tell you what I don't know. And besides, now that you've got me, I'm not going to hide anything. I'm no coward. I met that couple yesterday a little after noon. The second I saw them, a puff of wind lifted her veil, and I caught a peek at her. Just a peek. That's maybe why she looked so perfect to me. An absolute bodhisattva of a woman. I made up my mind right then to take her, even if I had to kill the man. Oh, come on, killing a man is not as big a thing as people like you seem to think. If you're going to take someone's woman, a man has to die. When I kill a man, I do it with my sword, but people like you don't use swords. You gentlemen kill with your power, with your money, and sometimes just with your words. You tell people you're doing them a favor. True, no blood flows. The man is still alive, but you've killed him, all the same. I don't know whose sin is greater, yours or mine. And then in parentheses, our sarcastic smile. I'm going to pause that section right there because this is another really, really interesting thing that he's doing in the short story. He's giving, it really reads like a script. And, you get like not just the dialogue and what they're saying, but the smile. There's a lot of moments like this throughout where you're getting, someone's sobbing uncontrollably, or they sit with a silence, and it just reads like you're reading a film script. And of course, it makes sense that Kurosawa would take this and almost takes it verbatim, for his script. And it just already feels cinematic in this form. Does anybody have anything they want to say before we move forward with this interesting story? Okay. So Tajomada's confession is pretty long, but we're just going to take a look at another part here. This is page 15. So basically what happens is this bandit, tricks the samurai and his wife into coming into the bamboo grove while they're traveling. He's like, oh, I have some treasure buried there, follow me and I'll show you where it is. And then that's when he tricks the samurai into going and then fights him and then binds him so that he can't move. And then he's gonna have, as he says, have his way with the woman. And Tajo Umaru is, as you can tell from his tone, he's like this cowboy type, just kind of like, lone, he doesn't care about what other people really think, but he still says, I'm not a coward. Like that's really important to him somehow. But he's kind of proud of being this criminal. And he's very impulsive, but this is the way he tells his story. Still, I didn't want to kill him in a cowardly way. I untied him and challenged him to a sword fight. That piece of rope they found was the one I threw aside then. The man looked furious as he drew his big sword, and without a word, he sprang at me in a rage. I don't have to tell you the outcome of the fight. My sword pierced his breast on the 23rd thrust. Not till the 23rd. I want you to keep that in mind. I still admire him for that. He's the only man who ever lasted even 20 thrusts with me. Cheerful grin. So in Tajomaru's version, they fought, and then only on the 23rd thrust, he was able to kill this samurai. So there's like a little bit of honor. There's a little bit of an acknowledgement, like he fought well. Cheerful grin. That's Tajomaru's side. Now, let's hear what the woman has to say because it's different. She starts by, she's just very emotional here too. Of course, her husband was killed, but in her version, and I know I'm running out of time, but I'm going to summarize this little bit, and then we can read a little bit of her voice. But in her version, she's so shameful of what happened to her, and when she looks over at her husband, he's looking at her with contempt, and she feels even more shame and sorrow and anger. And she speaks to him. She goes, "Oh, my husband, now that this has happened, I cannot go on living with you. I am prepared to die here and now, but you, yes, I want you to die as well." So she's proposing a double lover's suicide here. She just thinks this violence has been so, damaging that they both need to die together. And then he's looking at her with this contempt. And so she says, "This is the end. Please be so good as to allow me to take your life. I will quickly follow you in death." And with total contempt for me, he said, "Only do it." And so in her version, she kills him. But then when she tries to kill herself, she can't. She says, "Nothing worked. I'm still here, by no means proud of my inability to die." Forlorn smile. Um, and then she ends with a sudden violent sobbing. So, imagine what the magistrate is thinking right now. Like, what actually happened? We're getting two very different versions of what happened. Now we're going to get a third one, the testimony of the dead man's spirit told through a medium. Um, Again, we don't have time to look at all of this, but basically, this female medium comes in the film, and she looks crazy and just like she starts to summon the spirit and starts to talk as him, as the dead samurai. Let's just read the last part. Andrea, would you mind reading this? This is the last bit of the In the Bamboo Grove, page 19, from "After My Wife Ran Off." And remember, he's a samurai.
Okay. I'm not sure what a samurai is. Okay. Okay. After my wife ran off, the bandit picked up my sword and bow and arrows, and he cut my ropes at one place. Now it's my turn to run. I remember hearing him mutter as he disappeared from the thicket. Then the whole area was quiet. No, I could hear someone weeping. While I was untying myself, I listened to the sound until I realized that I was the one crying. Another long silence. I finally raised myself, exhausted, from the foot of the tree. Lying there before me was the dagger that my wife had dropped. I picked it up and shoved it into my chest. Some kind of bloody mass rose to my mouth. I felt no pain at all. My chest grew cold, and then everything sank into stillness. What perfect silence! In the skies above the grove on the hidden side of the mountain, not a single bird came to sing. The lonely glow of the sun lingered above the high branches of cedar and bamboo. The sun, but gradually even that began to fade, and with it the cedars and bamboo. I lay there wrapped in deep silence. Then stealthy footsteps came to me. I tried to see who it was, but the darkness had closed in all around me. That someone gently pulling the dagger from my chest with an invisible hand. Again, a rush of blood filled my mouth, but then I sank once and for all into the darkness between lives.
Wow, thank you for that wonderful reading, Andrea. So in his version, he killed himself. And the reason why I said remember he's a samurai is because, to and this is kind of a generalization, but it was true. It was one of the samurai virtues. If he's dishonored, then the most honorable thing is for him to commit seppuku, which is suicide by sword. And this is what the medium says through the spirit. And so this is how it ends. And you're just left wondering, what really happened? What is truth? What occurred here? There's no consensus. You could try to, read this over and over, and there's no sense of whose was the right one. And so that's the point of the story. And when you watch the film too, there's a lot of exploration on the gendered sense of like how a man wants to preserve honor versus a woman. There's a lot of performance of masculinity, but in different ways, the honor culture. But this is just such a fascinating scenario and it can only be explored in a fictional story like this. And because it's a story that's told from multiple perspectives that contradict each other, this is called the Rashomon effect in film. Whenever stories will do these multiple perspectives and they'll tell contradictory, and it's really influenced a lot of storytellers, and it all comes from Ryunosuke Akutagawa from 100 years ago. So I wish we had time to look at the nose, which is another really funny satire on it's a man who has a 6-inch nose and he tries to make it short. And I feel like if you read it today, you can kind of make connections with our current culture and, like social media and even like, the kind of procedures people will do for their face. And then at the end of the story, just like how he feels about that feels very relevant even now. So I hope that you can take some time to read that as well. But in the remaining few minutes, does anybody have any thoughts or questions that you wanted to share with the group?
Has anyone read The Nose by Gogol?
Yes, yes, I was thinking of that too. Thank you, Andrea. That's another nose story, but it's like opposite. That in that way, so
Right.
a Russian writer named Gogol wrote a story about a man who wakes up and I think his nose has gone off, and
Right,
it's
he
like
has no nose. Yeah.
his nose is like wandering the city and he has to catch the nose so he can put it back. Um, and the Russian composer Shostakovich wrote an opera based on that too. And there's like a big nose on the stage. Just it's really funny and strange. But the nose and Akutagawa was really fascinated by the nose too. There's a lot of mention on like pimples and long noses and people feeling all the feelings about it. Any other thoughts or
Interesting.
questions?
I don't know. After that first story, he sets you up for anything. I feel like if you got through the first story, you're good to go. You could take
You're
anything
right.
on.
You're right.
You
Yeah, and
know,
it's
because it
you're the
was so
first.
macabre. It was so macabre.
Yeah. And to think he was still a university student, when he wrote that.
Right. It's just
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah.
Well, I hope that as you continue to read and explore Japanese literature on your own, that you'll come across more writers who have won the Akutagawa Prize, and now you'll have more reference to the namesake. And you might even notice some of the literary legacies of some of these stories and the way, not just Japanese people, but all kinds of storytellers, they might be borrowing from Akutagawa stories as well. And I think the Kurosawa film itself can, we can talk on and on about that in itself, but that's another really good watch, especially if you've already read this. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll come back to discussing works by contemporary writers in the following installments. But I'm going to turn it over back to the staff at JAST in case you have any other updates.
Incredible. No, nothing else. Everybody give it up for Yurina.
Yeah,
Yay.
thank you. Thank
Way
you
to go,
very
This was
Yurina.
much.
fun.
Yeah, thank you.
We're lucky to have her.
Very
And
much. Thank
but
you.
guys, that's it. And thank you for joining us. And we will join us again. Join us next time. We hope to see everybody soon.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Great night. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Good
Bye.
night.